and the venture builder could then take on a new venture and build it from scratch.
You studied real estate. Now you don't build buildings, you build businesses.
Yeah.
Hi there, welcome to the Startup Evangelist. I'm joined with my guest, Kevin Thiong'o. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, how are you?
So maybe just to start us off, maybe just give me a brief about yourself professionally and your journey and what has led you to the chair you're sitting on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll start with an introduction. So my name is Kevin Thiong'o, currently a venture builder at Enviu. So my journey. So I like to think of myself as one of those people who didn't follow like a beaten path. What I did in school has hardly been what I have practiced. So my background is in real estate. I'm also a CPAK, but never been enthused by the idea of following either of those careers. So I've always been passionate about entrepreneurship as a way of solving problems and sort of understanding how to build entrepreneurship. What is the art behind entrepreneurship? What is the science behind entrepreneurship? So a lot of my 20s, I did a lot of experimenting with businesses, a lot of failures, which was good. And so I asked myself, why was I failing in business? And one of the ways I wanted to improve or rectify that is through spending time with experienced entrepreneurs. So early on in my career, I made a deliberate decision to be part of accelerator programs, be part of just supporting entrepreneurs in their journey with a bit of a selfish ambition to
become one.
To become one.
Yeah.
First of all, to understand how businesses are built. Is it something intrinsic?
Yeah.
Is it something extrinsic in the sense that it is something that you can learn as well? And I learned that it's a mix of both. So early on in my career, I joined accelerator programs, sort of walking the journey with entrepreneurs. And then how I got to Enviu is I was like, I have experimented as an entrepreneur. I have spent time with a lot of them in Kenya, in Uganda, also supporting in Ethiopia, a bit in Malawi, just different countries across the continent. And I was like, it's time now to apply my lessons, my failures, what I've learned walking the journey with entrepreneurs, and sort of now be on the other side, trying to practice the entrepreneurship.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's interesting you've said you studied real estate. Now you don't build buildings, you build businesses.
Yes.
And just going into that, you've mentioned Enviu, which is sort of a Dutch venture builder. You've worked across Kenya, Asia, etc. But just from a layman perspective or definition, what would be your definition of a venture builder or what is venture building?
Okay.
And probably how different it is from traditional VC investing, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen different organizations calling themselves venture builders. So I'll focus our own model of venture building at Enviu. So venture building is building your own ventures from scratch internally. And I would differentiate it from, say, supporting existing businesses to what we do at Enviu is we build our own ventures from scratch across different domain areas that we identify as issues we can solve. So a big thing about venture building is you're actually an entrepreneur who is building a venture from scratch. And, later on, I'll take you through the process of how we do that. Yeah.
So it's sort of in-house sort of ideation, you sort of, from day one sort of startup and then sort of building it to some level of scale where it can be investable or bankable.
Yeah.
Probably if you want to flash it more now, how do you start? So, is it a study, a survey? How do you sort of start that process? Yeah.
Okay. So the overall thing about Enviu is we build businesses that are good for people, good for planet. Sort of gives us a direction in terms of the focus of the venture building work we do. So we're looking to build, actually Enviu stands for environment and you. Yeah, so it's
really?
we're very
Okay.
much focusing on building businesses that are good for the environment or the planet, and also in turn good for the people. So under that, we have certain domain areas that we focus on. So Enviu has different country offices. So we have Kenya, we have Netherlands, which is sort of the head office. We have India, and we have Indonesia. And how it's structured is a lot of the work we do is led at these country levels. Like you'll find that in Kenya, we do a lot of the food work that Enviu does. In India, being a big textile country, we have a lot of innovations around textile. Indonesia, we have a lot of innovations around plastics.
So for those three, like if I'm in Kenya, most of your startups would be in agriculture, food.
Exactly.
If I'm in Indonesia, in View, I would be maybe working on a plastics startup. Okay.
So that's how it's set up currently.
Okay.
But how we look at it going forward is we would like to set up different programs. So in Kenya, we leverage on a lot of the learning, say we've got from Indonesia on plastics. So we're very open to having additional programs in East Africa. So currently we do a lot of food. We're also doing textiles, and we would be open to other programs, say, bringing the plastics program here. So it's all dependent on whether we can be able to mobilize resources that would help us to implement the venture building process. So it's not that textile has to be in India or food has to be in East Africa. So it's all dependent on whether we are able to mobilize resources, whether the funding or the actual venture building team, and so leverage on the learnings and the expertise we have gotten from the different country offices and bring it to
Kenya. Okay. So maybe from your perspective now, you've sort of done a lot in Kenya and sort of East Africa. How would you say is the venture building journey? How has it evolved? Say I don't know, 5 years ago to now.
Okay.
What has changed from your experience? And also you can borrow from some of the ventures you've actually sort of curated and they've sort of become standalone businesses. Yeah.
Okay. So actually, Enviu has been doing venture building for well over a decade.
Okay.
So we have had some very interesting innovations, especially in the Netherlands. One of the interesting ones that I would mention is dancing floors.
Really?
So I don't know if you're familiar with the band Coldplay, but they're very passionate about the environment. And so one of the innovations they have in their concerts is you can be able to install what you call like the dancing floors where that capture energy and then convert it to energy that can then be reused to power different things, whether in the concert or elsewhere.
So with the emotion of like the audience,
the dancing, the jumping,
it's sort of
and
converted
all that.
to some form of energy. And
so
sort
it
of
captures that energy, converts it into energy that can be reused.
Okay.
So, but one of the things that has really evolved with Enviu is looking to build innovations that have a commercial model. Yeah. So if you look at a lot of the donor funding struggles with sustainability or attributing the success of this funding to something tangible and something that is actually impact oriented.
Yeah.
So one of the unique things about Enviu is we are very keen on having innovations that have a commercial model that can be self-sustaining and also creating a lot of the impact that you're targeting.
Okay. So now for you, you're sort of moving now from just donor-led kind of program to more of business focused. And from let's use the example of some of the ventures you've worked on. I think you've done textile, and you've done, I think, agriculture. Maybe you could clarify.
Okay.
How was your sort of the process of doing that from scratch? For example, you mentioned you do issue analysis. And just break it down a bit.
Okay. So like I mentioned, in Kenya, we do a lot of work in food and in textiles. So let me talk a bit about textiles and then the food.
Yeah.
So in textiles, what we are doing is, so we realize that there's a huge problem, both on the post-consumer side of textiles and the post-industrial side. So the post-consumer is, what happens to garments when they're old, when they're torn and all that. But there's also the post-industrial side, which is what happens when large textile manufacturing companies manufacture garments and generate massive amounts of off-cut waste. So we look at the issue of textile waste, and so we built an innovation that is claiming this textile waste, sorting it, and then finding recycling technologies that can maintain it fiber to fiber, which means offcuts are generated by manufacturers. It is recycled and then reused in the textile supply chain again. So on the food side, we have two main programs. We have a program looking at post-harvest losses, which is a big issue. So as much as 40% of the food that is grown goes to waste and does not find either market or get consumed, which is a big problem. So we have a post-harvest loss program, and also we have a regenerative agriculture program that is looking at the subject of soil health and transitioning smallholder farmers to regenerative agriculture from conventional agriculture. So once we have defined what the program is, we have a very systematic process of the actual building. So we always begin with an issue analysis. So for example, if it's on the area of post-harvest losses, like digging down to the root issue and the root cause of the issue, to understanding what exactly is the issue at a system level, what is the issue at on the ground level, and can we tackle some of these gaps that exist through the venture building. So we do the issue analysis, and then based on the outcome of the issue analysis, we'll do conceptualization or ideation, which is basically developing concepts that could address these issues or problems that have been identified, which is the second stage. The third stage, which is a big component of how we do our venture building, is validation.
Okay.
Yeah. So we follow like mostly the lean methodology of venture building, where we are looking to learn as fast as possible and as cost effective as possible. So our job is very much to validate as it is to invalidate. So we're looking to validate either invalidation is a success to us because it means something would work. Validation is also a success. So how it works is now based on the concepts we have developed, we'll go about testing key aspects, like the critical assumptions or the risks that would make this work or not work. So based on the validation, we then craft a business model, and then we look to launch and grow that business model. So that is sort of how it flows. But also internally, over time, we have created a system that maximizes the chances of success, because building a business is very uncertain. So things will work, but they might not work. And one of the dangers of building a business is sometimes you might romanticize an idea or stay too long with an idea that is not working.
Get too attached to something, So
one of the ways we mitigate against that is, for us, venture building, in as much as we have venture builders within the team, it's a very collective process. We'll have a venture builder who is responsible for a venture, but growing that venture is very much a collective responsibility, because we believe no single person is smarter than all of us combined. So we have what we call a stage gate process internally, where during the issue analysis, so the team that is doing the issue analysis will come and present their issue analysis to an internal team comprising of different people in the organization, and they have to convince that stage gate committee that indeed you have done your assignment, you understand the issue analysis, it's thorough, it's well thought through, and the outcomes are solid. And then we can use the outcomes to then do the conceptualization or the ideation. And the same happens across all those different stages. So we'll have a stage gate at ideation. For validation, you'll have a stage gate to demonstrate that there's indeed a need for your product.
Got it.
There's desirability for your product. There's willingness to pay for your product. So that ensures, number one, it's collective, like I mentioned. And also, number two, that ideas that need to be killed are killed very early on. And so we don't, because resources are scarce, so we need to maximize the effectiveness of the resources that we have. And so it's something that we have been testing within the organization, and so far it's going well. And in addition to that, we've also created a venture building playbook that could also be public information. So, for example, if another venture building studio wanted to learn about how we build our own ventures. So we
Got
have a
it.
playbook that
Yeah.
sort of guides someone in the venture building
Okay.
process.
Okay. And then for you guys, how does maybe the success rate compare to? Because I guess for your situation, you kill a business even before it starts. There's that option, and then there is the journey after now it's launched. So how far do you go with the business until Series A, or what would be the
timelines? Okay. So it's been hard to put like a specific timeline, but we internally agree on what is acceptable. So and there are different routes we could take really. So for a venture builder, for example, you could build out a business and go through, issue analysis, ideation, validation, business model growth, and all that. And we actually say your job as a venture builder is to make yourself irrelevant as soon as possible.
Got it.
Which means you're putting in place the business model, and immediately you're beginning to hire a team that can run with the idea. And at the right time, the venture builder could transition to become like maybe the CEO of the company or take on a key position for the venture. Or we could hire an external team to take over the company, and the venture builder could then take on a new venture and build it from scratch. So like the textile venture, which is called Aptex. So that's what we did. So we hired an external team that came in to lead the company and sort of take it to the next level.
Yeah.
And who was a venture builder of that company, I'm now working under our regenerative agriculture program, building a new venture that is looking at market linkage for regeneratively grown produce.
Got it.
Yeah.
So there's an element of you're almost like a parent. At some point, you have to let go of this baby, and then maybe someone else takes over.
Yeah.
And what has been your experience now on this other side, on the regenerative ag? Maybe what are you seeing in terms of even trends? Because it's not a very, I don't think even half of the audience would know what regenerative ag is and what are the opportunities. Maybe you just want to add meat into it. Yeah.
Okay. So actually, we find ourselves pioneering a lot of the innovations that we are undertaking. So even before I talk about Regen, just to talk a bit about the textile side, I realized a lot of our work was building awareness in as much as it was building the venture. So some organizations that you would see as key stakeholders sometimes don't even fully grasp the innovation or are not like fully aware of the extent of the issue.
Got it.
So we find ourselves doing a lot of awareness, whichever program it is, and then going out to do the actual building.
Because I would assume even if I am, let's say you want to work with the government or like an EMA or any regulator, maybe they have not seen some of these companies or models before. So you have to sort of educate, build awareness, and then, come and, highlight what issues you want to partner with them.
The beauty of it is if you approach it from the issue analysis angle, so they identify with the issue. So they may not be too familiar with the solution, but at least they're like, oh yeah, problem, so we resonate with the issue. The problem is actually there. Because if there's no problem, then there is not really something that you're doing. So as long as they are affected by the problem, or they see the problem, or they agree with the problem, it's always an easier conversation. So now it's more of we have done the conceptualization, a bit of validation, and based on the results, this could be the proper solution. And so they engage us on that. So that has really helped. So just to differentiate a bit between the textile and the food in terms of what the experience has been, I would say it's been an easier journey with the food than the textile, because recycling post-industrial waste is not something that has taken root as much in Kenya compared to other textile nations like India, Sri Lanka. It's already happening a lot in a lot of those textile countries. Sustainable textiles.
There's even like policy around it, right?
Yes,
so
there's policy
here it's
around
more
it.
Fragmented still.
It's more fragmented, but also to give credit to the government. I think 2 or 3 years ago, we made a policy around sustainable waste management. And there was even the Sustainable Waste Management Act that was signed into law that brought on key aspects like extended producer responsibility,
EPR,
material recovery facilities. And so we have seen a lot of traction on that side. So the only thing is, effectively implementing it. But on the food side, a lot of the stakeholders are already aware of the problem, say compared to like textile. And so it's been an easier journey, building on the food side, because there's even more investor appetite on the food side.
There are more agri funds, there are more, and even like
Exactly.
agriculture is a very big GDP contributor. So it's very easy to rally people around it.
And it's like a backbone of our economy. And so there's a lot of already interest on that side. There's a lot of support. So mainly the challenge is with cracking certain problems, like, building models that can actually work, say, with the smallholder farmers, which is a very complex business model to build. So those are kind of the challenges we're dealing with, more or less on the awareness side, but more on actually bringing in innovations that can solve the issues on the ground.
I see. And then what would you maybe break down what is regenerative agriculture vis-a-vis what you've been used to?
Okay. So regenerative agriculture is primarily about the soil health. So it looks at the quality and the state of the soils. And the challenge really comes from what we look at as conventional agriculture. So a series of practices over many years that have degraded the soils. So degrading of soils means, in terms of like key aspects like the microbial activity, the nutrient composition and all that, or very key things that would are required for plants to thrive. And so regenerative agriculture looks very much at soil health. And just to contrast it with, say, things like organic agriculture, organic is very much about the safety of the food. So it doesn't look so much at the health of the soil or practices that don't pertain maybe to health. So regenerative agriculture has certain key practices and principles that farmers are required to adopt.
So it seems like for conventional agriculture, that's why I see like there's a lot of more focus on seedlings, like GMO, the quality of the seed to sort of counter the degradation of the soil. But for you, you're sort of taking it to first principle. Let's start with then, the fertility and this, the quality first before we sort of move further up the sort of value chain. Is that sort of the...
Yes, so with regenerative agriculture, we are looking at putting in place a system through practices that will ensure the soil is regenerating rather than degrading. So if you're doing certain things in your farm, like for example, you are doing very minimal tillage, or you're not using synthetic chemical-based inputs, you're doing water harvesting, companion planting, cover cropping. So a series of key basic principles that will ensure that the soil is regenerating as opposed to degrading. And to speak a bit about some of the conventional things, like you see there's a lot of monocropping, use of synthetic fertilizers. So the goal there is to increase the volume and the quality, in quotes, of the food that is coming out, and not so much thinking about the state of the soil. And so what that means is the next planting season, you find yourself, using synthetic inputs to try and get the soil to the state where it's required to be. So you're not really...
So the former is more of an extractive process, like maximizing, I have 5 years with this farm. I need to get as much as... And then...
So it's about getting as much as you can. So it's also very commercial driven. And the beauty of regenerative agriculture, even beyond the health of the soil in relation to the food, it has very key benefits environmentally, one of which is carbon sequestration. So we know about the effects of carbon in the climate. So what good soils are able to do, and especially the topsoil and all that, is they're able to sequester carbon and put it inside, so that the carbon is...
You almost become a carbon sink in a
exactly
way.
100%. So if we can ensure as much soil as possible is is of good quality, and we have a lot of roots that is holding together the topsoil and the soil. So we make sure, a lot of carbon sequestration is happening. Some of these things are complex to measure, but at least it's been proven that healthy soils actually do sequester carbon from the environment.
Now, someone would argue, can a smallholder farmer afford it? Because it's, I think Kenya, we've subdivided land, now we are talking of someone having just under an acre, under 2 acres, or even less. So how does that sort of compare in terms of from a cost perspective? Because most either farmers or cooperatives or groups would sort of start there. They wouldn't start from either quality or the environmental benefits. As much as they do know about it, they would look at the impact on bottom line.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll answer that question by beginning with an interesting observation and something we've heard from the smallholder farmers. They ask you, what is regenerative agriculture? And the moment you start explaining it and then talking about the practices, they're like, oh, I recognize it. My great-grandfather used to do those things. My grandfather used to do those things.
Okay.
So it's actually not a foreign concept.
So you are saying it's sort of culturally it was there, then for some reason,
yes,
all these practices that came in our farming were introduced. Maybe.
So you mentioned seedlings, for example. So a lot of our grandmothers had seed banks, for example. So it was very common to see them exchanging seeds. First of all, saving the seeds and then exchanging these indigenous seeds. But the question is, where have has the indigenous seeds gone? Seed banking has gone. So many practices have disappeared that were immensely valuable, even from an ecosystem perspective. And so they recognize these things. They're like, oh, and it's been easier for them to buy into this process because they're like, they have seen it and they also resonate with the challenges. They're like, so they'll ask you a question, or they will wonder, how comes my small piece of land used to provide, provide me with a certain amount of yield 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but that yield has been continuously declining. And, it's very much linked to the soil health, which is linked to the practices. So, like, for example, intercropping is something that used to be very common. Nowadays, you find that the land will only have like a specific type of value chain, say maize. And that's because the kind of pesticides you're spraying.
Got it. Yeah. Can't work for an intercropping environment.
An intercropping environment. So some of these things have disappeared over time, but we can bring them back. And also to talk about the question you asked about the cost, regenerative agriculture is actually meant over time to decrease the cost of farming for the farmer. So the challenge is there's a bit of like the initial investment. So when, for example, you talk about water harvesting, so there are certain structures you can build you're required to build, water harvesting structures like smile bams. So it's very labor intensive. So there's not a lot of income to deploy to the labor. So the main challenge we see is with the initial cost of it. But the whole design of regenerative agriculture is actually to reduce the cost of the farmer over time. And so we look at certain things. For example, one of the places we start is by designing for resilience or resilience design, where we look at where the farmer is, how does the water flow in the farm, some very foundational things. And then so you design regeneratively towards building resilience, so that the farmer, for example, can slow down the pace at which the water flows in the farm, so that you retain more water within the farm. So, and then also they're supposed to utilize as much as possible resources that are available to them. So instead of buying synthetic fertilizers, so we encourage certain practices like mulching a lot. So I mentioned minimum tillage. So instead of tilling the land so that you expose maybe like the the microbes in the soil and all that, so you can be able to mulch the soil as much as possible so that you maintain optimal conditions on the ground and these kinds of things. So you find that over time, your soil retains more water, your soil has more microbial activity, which is better for the plants. And so you're not, constantly digging the soil and degrading it.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of now, how would you do it from a venture? So for example, if you set up this venture, would the venture seek to be like an off-taker to the farmers that sign up to this partnership of regenerative ag? So you sort of guarantee offtake for their produce, or would that be the model?
Okay. So I'd link it back to the issue analysis. So for example, when we did our issue analysis on the challenges faced by the smallholder farmers, especially from a soil perspective, so you find there are a series of gaps across that chain. So first of all, there is a knowledge gap on they don't know, they might have an idea of what it is, but the full extent of what it is. So it means there's an information gap. So if we talk about regenerative agriculture, what are the inputs that are suitable for regenerative agriculture? So assuming someone adopts regenerative agriculture and you're telling them to increase the diversity in their farms and do intercropping, it means they will harvest more stuff, a variety of things. So where are they supposed to take it? Where are they supposed to sell it? So it means there is a gap around the market bit of it. So if they're required to expand from their small piece of land, and we have found that anywhere we are doing a lot of our regenerative agriculture, they have huge tracts of land. But so we usually begin with a demo farm. But then you need to demonstrate that how they can optimize it, and then they can expand their regen across the other tracts of land. And so that expansion is also, how do you support them to be able to do that?
It's almost like a JV kind of, almost like a JV with the farmers, because you can't just come with information and then leave them to implement. You sort of are involved throughout the production cycle, I guess.
Yes. So once we identify the series of gaps along the chain, then we can ideate concepts that will be targeted at the different issues or the different gaps that we have identified. Just to explain a bit further. So for our regenerative agriculture program, we have around 4 concepts that we are currently working on. So the one that is more advanced is on the training and input. So we have a venture called Grow that is at the forefront of training the farmers to transition to regenerative agriculture and sort of provide them with the inputs that they are required to practice that regenerative agriculture. So if Grow was to be successful, which we are seeing some very good traction in terms of farmers adopting and also sticking to the regenerative journey. So it means then there will be regenerative produce that will soon come. So we have a venture called Kilimo Connect that is looking to provide market opportunities for regeneratively grown produce that is coming from these farmers. So we have a venture called Shambani Pro that is looking at value addition. So sometimes there's a lot of produce that will come from the farmer. Some maybe might be second grade or third grade, depending how you look at it. Again, in the interest of curbing waste, there are processing opportunities that exist so we can value add some of this second grade produce and then still link it to market. We are also working on a concept that is looking at supporting the farmer to be able to expand their region across the farm. So if their demo farm is optimized and they see the results, there's willingness to scale that across the other land that they have. So we are working on a concept that can either support them by either providing so we are still testing what that could look like. So either providing funding for them or taking over their farms for some time to help them with the initial transition process, and then they can continue. So yes, to your point, it's very much a journey that we walk together with the farmer. Because before a farmer can say they have fully transitioned, it takes a while to say that, this is regeneratively grown produce. And we, because it's many practices that are supposed to put in. So we start by getting certain basic practices right first before we say, instead of having 6 practices, have you gotten at least 2 practices right? Then, go to the third, then the fourth. So there's a lot of hand holding. So it's a journey we walk together with them, and it's, long term.
Yeah, interesting. So maybe just going back to what you mentioned before, you've said you have this playbook on venture building. For me, I think we need more venture building studios out there.
Yeah.
What would be some of the sort of basics that someone should grasp if they're looking to, curate a venture building studio, for example?
Yeah. Okay. It would be important first to know what the focus is. Like I said, Enviu, environment, and good for people, good for planet.
So you think rather than having a very generic studio, I'd rather pick a niche or pick a set of focus areas to focus on?
I would say it makes it easier also from, first of all, a resource perspective, and also from, say, a mastery perspective, in terms of, we know we are good at building certain kinds of ventures. So once you have that, then in terms of the actual process, what I described earlier, it's issue analysis, conceptualization and ideation, validation, and then launch and growth, and so on and so forth. So I'd say the biggest resource is actually the people, the team. So not even so much knowing that this is the first process and this is the second process. It's actually about the quality of the implementation of the process. So that's very much at the fore. So one of the things I know as Enviu we're looking to do is get very good venture builders that we can onboard into a process. And there is no fixed profile for a venture builder. We are sort of looking for a different mix so that we have a different flavor and different perspectives within the team. So that would be very key.
I see.
But in terms of setting up a venture building studio, you need to know what the focus is. You need to know what the process is. You need the people to implement. And very importantly, you need partners, especially funding partners. So for us, in our case, we have development partners who have come on board and are giving us the funding to do the initial bit of it. But then it's up to us to prove that these ventures can actually be, viable and commercial. So that's sort of how I'd look at it.
Okay. So you've said focus, very important. Understand your niche to help on mastery and also just knowledge. And then the second is people, talent. And then you have to have a process, and then also looking at, who is going to fund whatever ideas that you want to focus on.
And then the partners.
And the partners, So interesting. And then in terms of enabling environment, what do you see is lacking in the current venture building setup, either in East Africa or Kenya? You've mentioned, you've seen some good policies from the government on the textile front, but generally from a venture building space, what would be a good enabling environment, and what's missing? What do you see changing, or what do you hope to see change?
Since venture building is resource intensive and you need resource partners, so one of the challenges we experience sometimes is balancing between sort of what the milestone of the funder is and the reality on the ground. So you find that a funder will come in and they have different themes of what they're looking at, and rightly so. So you find that there's renewable energy, there's women and youth empowerment, there's low uplifting the income levels of maybe people in rural areas. And so there are all these things that the funding is supposed to achieve that sometimes it takes away from, are you able to build a sustainable commercial model and still speak to all these other milestones that you're required to meet as well. So I think there's a balance that is required. And I'd say it's actually a conversation that we are recently having. You find that, certain ventures or certain entrepreneurs or businesses, they have raised so much funding with a story more than a business model.
I see.
We can do this, we can empower this, we can achieve that.
Yeah.
On the story side, but they're not profitable businesses.
Yeah.
And we've seen some of them closing down
Yeah.
because the emphasis was less on the business model and more on the story that is supposed to be achieved.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is missing, and where maybe the support would come in, is also making sure that you're putting money towards building something that is sustainable, or also putting money in businesses that have cracked their business model. So it doesn't make sense if you put a lot of money in a business that has no business model, simply because the business that has a working business model is not ticking your CSR boxes. So sometimes that is something that you're supposed to look at.
You're saying we need to move our, like, it's almost like we come with a set of fixed metrics that might not sort of work for a venture building kind of concept. Either from a timeline perspective, or even just, do we need to measure all these gender and impact and all these benefits at this stage, etc. So I see your point there. On the funding space, how can we change the landscape? Do we need more venture building type funding rather than just generic programs? What do you see maybe that could improve?
So one of the things we are keen at doing, and why I appreciate a platform like this, is so that we can also talk about some of the successes we've seen with venture building. So one of the ventures that we are very proud about that we have built here in East Africa is Soko Fresh, and our post-harvest loss program, that is providing cold storage solutions, to smallholder farmers looking to extend the shelf life of their produce and ensure that more food gets to the consumer and it doesn't get spoiled along the way. And we have seen a lot of traction, both on the impact side, a lot of traction on the business model side. We have had institutional investors come into the business, which is a big external validation. So Enviu might still be like the majority shareholder, for example, but you find there are all these other stakeholders who have come on board. And that's a very good story to highlight that, venture building model can actually work. And we have other examples if you go to Indonesia, that using our venture building approach. And so we are looking at it as convincing through actual results and action rather than, again, just mere storytelling. And so we are looking to attract more funding partners who can come in and back a model that is actually working, and trying to sort of achieve both the impact side of things as well as the business model commercial. Because at the end of the day, you need to keep the lights on. You need to make sure that you're turning a profit. So it's not just the story.
You need to pay the bills.
You need to pay the bills.
True. Well, I think we could talk about this till the cows come home. But just to wrap it up, Enviu, you've been there for a decade plus. What's the future looking like? What do you think you're going to do more, less? What are you learning? What can we keep tabs on?
Okay. So one of the things we're looking to do is keep rolling out more programs. So for example, here in East Africa, yes, we have the food, we have the textile, but we are open to plastics and all that. So we're looking to keep building ventures, so to keep building concepts that are successful, good for the people, good for the planet. So that's our model. So in the near future, watch out for new programs that could be rolled out. So that means we need to keep growing our team, some very good venture builders. So also making sure that we are creating a system that would be attractive to like a good venture builder who would come in and be part of the journey of making a difference. So rolling out more programs, rolling out more concepts, and getting it right with the innovations, getting it right with the business models. And at the end of it all, just creating more impact around the different thematic areas that we have.
Sure. Thanks for your time, Kevin. This has been quite innovative. I've learned a lot. I didn't know a lot about Regen and all that. And I think you've unpacked quite a lot around venture building generally. So I'm sure we'll put all the information around some of the ventures you've worked on, what you're working on in terms of even the playbook, etc. In our description for all our audiences to engage and reach out and interact with you guys.
Thank you so much for having me and the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.